Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Colonel Retired Bill Butler. I'm the Chief of Staff at the National Veterans Memorial and Museum, and I'd like to welcome everybody as we celebrate Black History Month. And on behalf of our President and CEO, Lieutenant General Retired Mike Faraday, welcome. We've got a great program today where we've got the opportunity to talk to a Tuskegee Airman about his life experience. Joining us today is Dr. and Lieutenant Colonel Retired Harold Brown, a resident of Port Clinton, Ohio, a man who in the 6th grade knew he wanted to be a pilot. After graduating from high school, he applied for military flight training and reported to the Tuskegee Institute in Alabama. Dr. Brown successfully completed his training and graduated in May of 1944, receiving his wings and commission as a second lieutenant at 19 years of age. He's a decorated combat aviator, but I won't go into all those details since Dr. Brown is here to share that with us. After a successful 23-year career in the United States Air Force, Colonel Brown retired and entered academia as an instructor and department chair in the Columbus Area Technician School, which is now Columbus State Community College. After a 20-year teaching career, he founded Brown and Associates, an educational consulting firm that he ran for 26 years until retiring at age 88. So quite the accomplishments. And we can't wait to hear your story. So, sir, I'll pass it over to our president and CEO, Lieutenant General Mike Faraday.
Well, good morning and welcome, everybody. As Bill said, I'm Lieutenant General Mike Faraday. It's a real pleasure and an exciting show that we have today. And so what a pleasure it is to be with you, Colonel and Dr. Harold Brown. And how are you doing today?
I am just great, thank you.
All right, well, good. So we're gonna just have a nice chat today. And how about starting off by telling us about your childhood and growing up?
Well, let's go back about 80, 90 years or so. I was born and raised in Minneapolis, Minnesota. My mother and father left Talladega, and how they got from Talladega up to Minneapolis, I will never know. But nevertheless, that's where they finally wound up. My childhood was reasonably like most childhoods, but keep in mind, in Minneapolis, there weren't very many people that looked like us. We were probably no more than 0.5%. We lived on the north side of Minneapolis. There was a small group of Black folks on the south side of Minneapolis, and then another group over in St. Paul, Minnesota. So this was life. It's interesting as we often talk about integration and whatnot, because let me tell you how integrated I was. On the right side of us was a Swedish family. Across the street was a Polish family. Right behind our house, there were 2 Latino families. Down on the corner, there was a Jewish family. And we lived on Bradford Avenue, so there we had all of us. The school I went to, Blaine School, K through 6, there was only 3 folks that looked like us. Myself, my older brother, who was 5 years older than I was, and then there was another young kid by the name of Fred Kane. And what made him somewhat unique is that his father was the only person of color on the Minneapolis police force. As a matter of fact, he was a detective. So this was life growing up in Minneapolis. And we were there. We did all of our things together, ice skating, all the rest of it. And that went on until after we completed the 6th grade, then we would go over to the 9th grade down at the Sumner. And then from Sumner up to North High School. But life was good. We did the things most young kids did. We were all poor. None of us had anything, and we just made do with what we had. But this is the way it was, and I don't know if I can add a heck of a lot more to it other than that. But let me add just one other thing. There was a Phyllis Wheatley house right there in our neighborhood. And there was a lady by the name of Gertrude. I'm trying to think of Gertrude's last name. It slips me right now. But she came up from Dayton, Ohio, as a matter of fact.
Oh.
And she took over, and she was quite a gal. She went out and she raised money, and she built this beautiful new building, Phyllis Wheatley, big gym, all of the facilities in it. They even had apartment buildings right in it for young men going over to the University of Minnesota, needing a place to stay, would often live there. And that was almost like our home, our second home for all of the youngsters running around. So life was good. We participated in all the sports and so forth. And it was the north side versus the south side. But this is the way it was. A very, very good life.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. So somewhere during that time, somewhere around sixth grade, you decided that you would be a pilot. Tell us about that.
Yeah, my mother, she played the piano, and that is somewhat of a stretch to say she played the piano. She kind of stumbled over the keys a bit, if you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. So she always hoped that I would learn to play the piano and I would be a pianist. And we started off, well, geez, I think I was something like 6, 7 years old when I took my first piano lessons. And I progressed up until I was about 11 years old, 6 years old. And woke up one morning and thought, I want to become a pilot. And I don't know how that came about. I don't remember seeing any movies about pilots during that time. So that didn't motivate me. But whatever it was there. And I've often thought, I don't know what it is, but it just happened. And from that time on, I told my mother I'm going to become a pilot. Well, you can imagine me in the 6th grade, 11 years old, telling my mother I'm going to become a pilot. And she just sort of looked at me kind of strange. And she said, boy, have you lost your mind? What are you talking about, a pilot? Well, Ma, I want to become a pilot. And I don't want to play the piano anymore. So we had our little arguments and whatnot, but Mom finally gave in. My music teacher said, well, Mrs. Brown, you're wasting your money if Harold isn't practicing, and he's not practicing. So that where it all began. I was going to become a pilot. But from that point on, I really became involved in building little model airplanes and so forth. Got to be pretty good. Built some very, very neat aircraft that flew quite well. Back in those days, the airplanes that you flew, you had rubber running from the prop through the body all the way back to the rudder, and you would wind up the prop and let it go. And if it was airworthy, it would fly. So we did an awful lot of that. Later on, when I was in my teens, I became a soda drinker. And 16 years old, I saved up $35. And I had my Uncle Cozell to take me out to World Chamberlain, which is now the big international airport up in Minneapolis, St. Paul. And I found a little fixed base operator and said, sir, I got $35 and I would like to take flying lessons. And they said, well, it will cost you $7 for dual instructions. I said, well, that would get me 5 lessons. And by Then I hope I'll save enough money to take another 5 lessons, and I will solo. Well, I got the first 5 lessons, and my first flight, after 10 minutes, I loved it, and I had found my place, and we were up for just about 50 minutes, but the first 10 minutes, that convinced me that I had made the right decision. And I was in love with flying. Took my first 5 flying lessons, and that was it. And then the rest of it, you probably know a little bit about graduation. And then, from there on, the rest is history.
Yeah.
But that is how it all started.
Well, tell us a little bit about the Tuskegee Institute. What was that like, and how did you end up there?
Well, let's go back and I'll give you a little history. In the late 38s and 39s, there was a big argument going on between Black folks and the War Department. And debate was whether or not they would give us the opportunity to fly. The War Department took the position that this is a big waste of time. The War College in 1925 developed a paper, and the paper was titled The Use of Negro Manpower During Wartime. And that paper talked about us Black folks at that time, and it was a very, very derogatory paper. We were on the very lowest rung of the social economic scale, didn't have the intelligence, went so far to talk about our brains was smaller than the average white person's brain. And you can imagine how it went on and on and on. Matter of fact, the paper is in circulation even nowadays. You can probably even pick it up. But it was quite an article. So the department used that and said it'd be a complete, total waste of money to even attempt to train these guys to fly. We aren't going to do it. So the argument went on, and we had our group, the NAACP, and a lot of other variety of people. As a matter of fact, Senator Truman at that time was a great supporter of us. And finally, in 1941, Roosevelt, in March of 1941, said, that's it. We're going to train one squadron. A squadron, and it would be called the 99th Pursuit Squadron, consisting of 35 pilots and 27 aircraft. The first pilot class was named in July of 1941, and that was the beginning of our training in July. Now, this was before the war even started. As a matter of fact, Hitler had just walked all over Europe, and he was standing on the brink of the Channel, waiting to cross the Channel. But in order to do that, he had to have air superiority, and he couldn't. And that was during the time of the Battle of Britain, when he sent over the famous V2, weapon that he was sending over, and they never did gain air superiority, and that prevented him from actually invading England at the time. Winston Churchill had a saying that never have we owed so much to fighter Hitler from actually rambling here going on. You want to repeat it to make sure I answered it?
No, sir, you're doing great. You are really doing great. How amazing I did the quick math here, what I call sidereal math. So 83 years ago, that decision was taken. And today our Secretary of Defense is General Retired Lloyd Austin, and having been the commander of all troops in Iraq as well. And I don't think you could tell anybody that other than the top leadership and inspirational leadership that he brings. So I'm so glad that you were a part of that. And I think what we'll do now, if we can, is we're going to show a quick film, and then we're going to talk about your exploits in combat. So stand by for a film.
I can recall my first mission I flew. They came in and they really hit the bombers on that one. And I can remember Major Cameron saying, "Oh, I think we're in for a dogfight today because these guys are not breaking off."
During the 1930s, segregation and racial inequality were rampant throughout the United States. The onslaught of the Great Depression only made matters worse, and African Americans were often among the first to lose their jobs, creating an even greater rift in the cultural divide. But in spite of all of this, young Harold Brown of Minnesota kept his ambitions set high.
Well, I was nothing but a snotty-nosed kid born and raised in Minneapolis. My mother always had hopes that I would be a pianist, and that continued until I was in the 6th grade and woke up one day and decided I was going to become a military fighter pilot. I don't know how it happened, but it was just something that happened. And I recall going in and telling my mother that I don't want to practice anymore. I'm going to become a pilot. And she looked at me as if I had lost my mind. You have to keep in mind that they were not training blacks for pilots. Back in those days, segregation was not only by law, but by tradition. And that's the way it was practiced.
As far back as World War I, African Americans had attempted to become military pilots, but had only faced rejection. But in the late 1930s, with the world's climate once again shifting towards war, things began to change.
And finally, in March of 1941, President Roosevelt said, "That's it. We're going to train one squadron made up of 35 pilots and 27 aircraft." And that was the beginning.
Named for the university at which they trained, the Tuskegee Airmen became the first African-American squadron in U.S. military history. The gates were now open for Harold to achieve his dream of becoming a pilot.
I had only one thing in mind. I wanted to fly, and nothing else mattered. So in June of 1942, 17 years old, graduated from high school, went down, sat for the exams, passed them, and was invited, down to join. And we were the 332nd Fighter Group in the 15th Air Force. We had the Red Tails. They only trained 992 pilots. Out of the 992 pilots, only 355 of us went overseas to fight the war.
In the summer of 1944, Harold was sent to Europe to join the rest of the 332nd Fighter Group, attached to the 15th Air Force. The 15th was in need of fresh pilots and aircraft after losing hundreds of planes in their bombing campaigns across Europe.
And at that time, they had lost 114 bomber crews out of the 15th, 10 men each. That's a lot of airplanes and a lot of men. They felt the primary reason why they lost that many is that the other fighter groups were running off looking for victories, leaving a gap in the protection of the bomber. The Germans were coming in and knocking them down. And I can remember when I finally got overseas, we met Colonel Davis. He says, "I only want one promise out of you, that you will stick with those bombers
You get them up there, you take them to target, get them back home safely so they can fly another day. I can recall my first mission I flew, saw no enemy aircraft, nothing. On a number of my missions, I never would even see an enemy aircraft. Others, I saw a lot of them. On my 12th mission, we were escorting bombers deep up into Germany, and we knew they were up there. This time, I don't know, there were 8 or 12 of them, and they came in and they really hit the bombers on that one. And I can remember Major Campbell saying, "Oh, I think we're in for a dogfight today because these guys are not breaking on." They came in, they hit them, we dove down on them. And when you pick up a guy, if you time it right, you can get them in your sight for no more than 1 or 2 or just 3 seconds. But then they're so fast, here they go, and they're pulling away from you. They must have had a dummy in this one because we came in on him like so, and instead of flying straight ahead, he rolls over, which means that he is staying in my gun sight a little while longer, and he's given me the opportunity to get in not 1 burst, but 2 bursts, but several bursts. Well, fine with me if you want to play that game. And we were shooting at this guy all the way down, bloop, 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 bloop. He pulls out over the treetops, and he led us right into a flak trap. We come over it, and everything they were throwing up at it. I said, "Oh, he suckered us in, you know." I apparently was hitting my wing tanks or something because I have fuel exhaust, 25,000 feet, no engine. And this thing is dropping like a rock. So we get down to 10,000. I spotted an old abandoned fighter strip. Dead stick, nothing. And you're trying to jockey around, but you got to slow the airplane up slow enough so you can land the damn thing. Long story short, I just forced it on the ground, hit the ditch, goes up, breaks in half right behind the cockpit. So I jump out of it, and rough landing, but it's the same landing you walk away from, it's a good landing.
Harold was fortunate to walk away from his first real encounter with enemy aircraft. But when he flew his 30th mission several weeks later, he would be faced with a very different outcome. In March of 1945, Harold and the 99th Fighter Squadron were given a mission to strafe and destroy German supply trains near the Austrian border. When the fighter planes arrived at their destination, they were delighted to find a great concentration of enemy train cars.
The last thing they expected were fighters. And there were locomotives all over the place. And the guys screaming, "Look what we got." And there was just this chatter guy, "Boy, I got this one. Did you see I got this one? Hey, I just blew up." Oh, just chatter, chatter, chatter. Damn it, they missed one. Look at that great, big, beautiful one they missed. Let's go get them. So I went in on them. And I had that locomotive lit up like a Christmas tree. And just as I pull up to go over it, that's when it explodes. This big explosion, I got caught in it. Then all of a sudden, the oil pressure started acting up. The oil temperature starts going up high, and the engine quit. I rolled it over, kicked the nose up, jettison the canopy, and it throws you out. So I land on the ground in a short while. Here's a couple of guys up on skis, and they jump off the skis and they put a rifle on me. So I immediately, threw up my hands.
Harold had landed somewhere in Germany and was now in the custody of 2 German constables. They marched him directly to a nearby village, which had suffered collateral damage due to the 99th strafing mission. As Harold entered the town, he was quickly met by an angry mob.
Here I come along as one of the pilots. They want a piece of me. Matter of fact, they'd even selected the perfect tree for it. what am I going to do? I can't run, I can't hide, I can't do anything. And I just knew I was going to die. Next thing I knew, I felt a hand on my shoulder. One of the constables stepped in front of me and put a round in his rifle and kept him from killing me.
Over the next several weeks, Harold would be transferred from one POW camp to another, enduring interrogation and near starvation. But as the Allies continued to close in on Germany, Harold knew all he had to do was hold on a little while longer.
The Allies were coming from the west, and they were moving eastward. The Russians were in the east, and the lines are slowly collapsing. And they keep evacuating the prisoners inland. And we knew that, Patton wasn't that far away. And there were even times in the evening you could hear the tanks way off in the distance. You knew precisely what was going on. And that morning, we could hear the tanks, just beyond the big barbed wire fence. And they knocked down part of the fence, and they come through these huge, big tanks. And Patton was behind about the second or third tank. And he was talking about, well, we got them on the run. He says that when I get into Berlin, I'm going to catch that dash. He had the filthiest mouth in the world. I'm going to catch him, and when I catch him, I'm going to do dash. And every time, all 1,000 guys was, yay, Patton. And he said, well, I'm on my way to Berlin. I'll be there in another few days. And we were, yay, Patton. Of course, they stopped him, and they never allowed him to go into Berlin.
The glory of taking Berlin would be passed from Patton to the Russians, but the American forces and all of Europe breathed a sigh of relief. The war against Germany was finally over, and Harold was returning to the United States. The Tuskegee Airmen emerged from the war as a highly revered fighter group, possessing some of the best pilots in the U.S. Air Forces with an outstanding bomber protection record. The exceptional defense they provided for their bombers earned them the nickname the Red-Tailed Angels.
There was any number of times we're bringing the airplanes back. We hear some bomber up there that was part of our group started hollering and screaming, I just lost my second engine. I got 2 engines out, fighter cover. I need fighter cover. And the old lead aircraft, check your fuel levels. Who's got some fuel? Okay, you 4 guys, go back and find that bomber. They go back up, find them, and bring them home. And we did that regularly. And they said, who are these guys flying these damn red tails? He said, man, these guys are with us all the way. Who are these guys? And someone came up with the idea of the Red-Tailed Angels.
In 1948, the Tuskegee Airmen's performance in World War II played a pivotal role in President Truman's decision to fully integrate the United States Armed Forces. Americans of all races and cultural backgrounds were finally serving side by side. To this day, the Red Tails continue to be a shining example of the importance of perseverance and equality.
At the time, it just didn't occur to me the history that we were making. I mean, that was the last thing on my mind. As I became older, I started then realizing the significance. And if it had not been that we had performed at such a high level, I don't know if Truman ever would have integrated. But we did, and so we did it. So when I reflect back on it, there was always obstacles. But again, if the Tuskegee Airmen could overcome all their obstacles, hey, you can do it too.
That's amazing. And everybody, if you're just joining us, we're doing a virtual rally point. This is our first Saturday of every month program. And today we have the inspirational leader, Colonel retired Harold Brown, Dr. Harold Brown, Tuskegee Airman, And we just viewed an amazing video of your exploits. As you view that now, give us your thoughts on what it was like to serve in combat and protect those bombers and fly with your wingmen.
Well, it was something I always dreamed of, and I often reflect back that how often does one have the opportunity to really live out their dreams? And I had that opportunity. And I was nothing but just a snotty-nosed kid, came home from the war just 20 years old. But it was quite an experience, and obviously something I'll never forget, for the rest of my days. But life was good. And matter of fact, I stayed into the military for the next, until I had 23 years of service. I spent my last nine and a half years, I was in SAC. And I was always an instructor pilot throughout my entire career. Matter of fact, in 1946, I went to the Air Force Instrument Instructor School down in Shreveport, Louisiana, 5 of us. And who was one of those 5 guys, first lieutenant, was no more than big old Chappie James, who became the first 4-star general, was one of the group of us that took that training. And we were very, very dear friends. But I spent my last nine and a half years in SAC. I was an instructor pilot, flying the old 6-jet engine B-47, which was a little different from flying all of the fighter aircraft that I had flown. And I just thought there was more to life than pushing a handful of throttles. And I was 40 years old at the time. And throughout my whole military career, you were doing one of 2 things. Either you were fighting a war or you were training to fight a war. And when I got out, this whole ideal of training education was something I had done, the first 40, 20 odd years of my life. So that's when I decided to go back to school and to go into education. And in particularly community colleges was just coming into existence, which I think was one of the best things that had ever happened. You can stay at home, go to school at a very cheap price, pick up your first 2 years, get your associate degree, go out and get a job, or else if you choose to, you continue on for another couple of years, go to one of the senior universities, pick up your baccalaureate degree. But the 2-year college system was perhaps the best thing that they had come up with. And that is what I did, for the next 20 odd years till I retired from there and went on to other things. But that was it for me. And I continued.
Let me ask you a question on this one. So many of our viewers are veterans who are coming out of the war. They're young, 30-year-olds and that. And what advice would you give them with regard to transitioning out of the military, and advice with regard to education as we play off the idea that you just mentioned?
Well, all I can say is this. I think the military really prepares you. You will have an experience that once you leave it, you are ready. I can recall when I was down at the Columbus State Community College, a young man would come in, 18 years old, with his mother, and had no idea what he wanted to do. And we would have a chit chat. And I would suggest to him, have you ever thought about the military? You can go to the military for 4 years, make good money, come out, they'll pay for your education. You just can't beat a deal like this. And I've had any number of my students who came in at 18, finished up, their military training at 22, come back and come in to see me and said, Harold, that was the best advice you ever gave me, by going into the military. And they were ready. They weren't ready when they were 18. They didn't know what they wanted to do. And by spending those 4 years, the military, a fantastic experience, came out. They were now ready, and they decided what they wanted to do with their lives and had very, very successful careers. So it's just a wonderful opportunity, and the military does so much in taking a young kid and turning them into a full-grown man and becoming an outstanding citizen.
We believe that so much. And we know that when a veteran returns to their neighborhoods and to their schools and into businesses, they just make things better. In fact, they can't even help themselves. They're like a Labrador with a tennis ball. If you throw it, the dog chases. And if you get a veteran on your team, he or she's going to make things better for everybody. And that is just an amazing.
You got that right.
So you've had an entire life of self-improvement and taking on challenges and actually breaking through glass ceilings. And this is Black History Month. Give me some thoughts on when you thought it was maybe going to be too hard to get through, but you kept pressing. Give us some examples of that.
Well, unfortunately, there were two sets of rules. There was a set of rules for guys like you. There's a set of rules for guys like me. And it always seems as if whatever I wanted to do, I had to do it well. And that just became a part of my life. I refused to be second best. I was always striving to be number one in everything that I ever did. So most of the things that I had decided to do, whether it was going back to school, was getting my doctorate. When I was in the 2-year college system, I became the vice president of academic affairs. But achievement. And that was just the way that I have always have lived throughout my entire life, from one challenge to the next. And I don't know if I got that from my mom and dad, and I assume that they have something to do with it. But that is the way Harold Brown lived his life. And achievements was just something that I did, and I was very happy with it. And that's the way I've lived. I lived that way up until I finally retired. I was 83 years old and finally called it quits and said, I'm not working anymore. And I had done enough. And that's when I finally stopped. But
now you told me that you flew recently, just a couple years ago. So tell us about flying the same airplane just recently.
Oh my goodness! I've in primary we flew the PT-17 Stearman. Wide wing, 2 open cockpits, whatnot. I soloed that aircraft in 7.5 hours. The first airplane that I ever flew. Up here in Port Clinton, where I live over at the airport, there's a gentleman there, Ed, who reasonably wealthy, has developed a fantastic air museum, and we're very, very dear friends. And the museum is just growing, a fantastic thing that he has done. So one day I asked him, I said, Ed, know anybody who has a PT-17 Stearman? And he says, yeah, I got a friend that's got one. I said, well, you think you could talk him into coming down here and we can fly it a bit? And he said, well, what's the big deal about a PT-17? I said, that's the first airplane I soloed. I decided I wasn't going to fly anymore. I was 92 years old, a part-time pilot, but I was a part-time pilot. and it was time for me to just give it up. So I decided that's going to be the last. That's the first airplane I flew. It's going to be the last airplane that I flew. So we came down. We flew around for about 40 minutes. Came in and landed, and I think to myself, well, that's the end of my flying days. I was 90 the summer of the summer of 4 years ago. I was 92 years old. That's it. My flying days have now ended, and I have never flown since. I had a lot of offers. I got a lot of good friends who fly. I said, nope, I'm not going to do it because I might enjoy it and I might break my promise and go back into it. But no way. So,
well, I wouldn't be surprised.
Last airplane.
I would not be at all surprised if our United States Air Force wouldn't call you back to active duty, because we can tell that you're ready. So what do you think? What's the next challenge? How will you take on the next challenge? And you are a man who's impactful. What's on your mind?
Well, to enjoy myself. I figure I'm in the fourth quarter. I don't have too many years left. And I was fortunate enough I survived. And I'm going to just enjoy these last few years doing the things that I want to do. However, my wife and I, we were silly enough to write a book a few years back. And she's the one who really put the thing together. And once we did, we were going to settle down, but what happened, it was very popular. We wound up traveling. We've been through some 10 or 12 different states, book of reviews, whatnot, book signing affairs, and that has just occupied more of my time than I ever thought that it would. And it was interesting because we've always have been in great health, but now we've had a few health issues. We've been running around and we just sat down and decided that's it. But that's what we said before we wrote the book. So now we're saying it again. That's it. And we're going to spend these last few years just having a little fun. I love to play golf. She loves to do a lot of the things that she wants to do. And for the most part, we are getting away with it, but not too often, because now it is guys like you that say, hey, Harold, we'd like to interview with you. Sure, I'll interview with it and whatnot, and we'll get on and we'll have a little chit chat. So no, I'm trying to hide from guys like you.
Well, we found you. Thank goodness we found you.
I'm only kidding about that, of course.
Yes, sir. Hey, so tell us the name of your book.
But this is pretty keep your airspeed up. The lives of a Tuskegee Airman. Yeah, and I thought the name was rather interesting because you can take it, you can apply it to anything that you want in life, and just substitute airspeed for any other thing. If you want to become a doctor, you can do that. If you want to do anything, you can do it. But keep your airspeed up is nothing but a very generic term. And
love it.
So that's it. As a matter of fact, you have probably seen pictures of it, but just in case if you haven't and whatnot, that is what it looks like.
All right, everybody. So sales are going to skyrocket after this. I know that's for sure. We like to say around here, don't slow down. And I think that's probably pretty close to keep your airspeed up. So now as we get close to wrapping up here, tell us, as you look back, what was the single thing that you think defines you and all that you've been?
Well, I like to tell people the one defining thing is I survived. And I say that in a very real sense because it seems as if that has been the story of my life. I have always set goals for myself, and then after achieving the goals and whatnot, and then it was on to the next thing. And it's been nothing but just a series of goals, doing this, and doing this. And I've lived a very exciting life. I wouldn't change one day of it. And even right up until now. And here I am, 96, reasonably good health, had a few health issues. And even though I am in the fourth quarter, sure, I got a few years left. And every time I get up in the morning and I see the sunrise, I say, well, the good Lord gave me another day and I'm going to take full advantage of it and live it to its fullest. And that's life, you know, and that's my life right now. Enjoying every day that I get.
So you take us back to 1941 and a decision taken to allow you all to be the pilots. And then today, our Secretary of Defense, General Lloyd Austin, former Secretary of State, General Colin Powell, who's the chairman of our honorary board, and then great men like General Les Lyles, Air Force Star, and General Mike Garrett, our friend, and Nadia West, President Barack Obama and Vice President Kamala Harris, and then really inspirational leaders like Candace Brady and Stacey Queen and Tony Hill. So many have followed in your footsteps. Did you ever think that each of those hurdles you overcame was going to have such a giant impact on so many in the future?
Oh, absolutely not. And as I reflect back on my life, you know, whoever dreamed that someone like me would now be the head, the chief of staff of all of our armies in the military? Whoever thought that at the same time Charlie Brown would be the head of the Air Force? I never in my life thought I would see two guys looking like me running the Air Force and running the Air Force. You know, so many wonderful things have happened. And even though we got a few problems, you know, I've always said this is the greatest country in the world. A good friend of mine wrote a book before I did. He was in the second class, Charlie Dryden. He called it the A Train. And Charlie Dryden often talked about he would get questions, why in the world would you do it, and so forth. And Charlie had only one response. He says, this is my country. I love it. I took an oath when I became an officer to protect it, and I will do it. But more important than that, my belief comes out of the one thing that I honestly believe, and that is this. This country has the capacity to change. And it does change. And it is changing every day. And things are getting better and better and better. And in a few more generations, I say there will be just one rule for all of us that will govern us, and everything will be wonderful. I probably won't see it. You probably won't see it, but it will happen.
That is a man of great faith and great
my
belief.
Story.
Amazing courage throughout your entire life. For everyone out there, we're just so fortunate to be with Colonel Harold Brown, Tuskegee Airman, an inspirational leader, and just an amazing example for all of us, all of you. We'll be doing programming coming this spring and summer for Inspired Youth Series, where we're going to get our first responders and veterans and school-age kids together and create a better understanding between them. We'll continue our veteran voices and continue our virtual rally points. But as we get ready to wrap up now, Harold, tell our audience, anything that's on your mind in terms of your service to country and what they can do as well.
Well, all I can say is this. We're going through some very, very difficult times, but we'll get over it. And I think we got an outstanding gentleman who is now the president of our country, and Biden will really provide the leadership we need to get out of this mess that we're in right now. And we'll conquer COVID-19, and it'll take a little while, but the future's bright. And all I can say is hang in there, and this too will all pass.
Well, hey, thank you so much to you and Marcia, who's in the background there, keeping us all straight. And thanks for your lifetime of service. And to everybody out there, this has been an amazing virtual rally point. We love this program. We get to meet the greatest people, and here during Black History Month, to be with Harold Brown and hear his storied career and just the wisdom that you bring into the room is fantastic. So on behalf of all of our audience, on behalf of the National Veterans Memorial Museum, it's been our distinct pleasure to be with you, and we hope to see you again soon. And with that, I'm going to turn over to Bill Butler, our Chief of Staff, and he'll wrap us up. Thank you, sir, for so much today. God bless you.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. Thank you, Dr. Brown. This kicks off our rally points for 2021. You said you like to finish first in everything you've done, and I can tell you without a doubt this has been our best rally point since we started these in 2018. So you set a high bar, very high bar for everybody else for the rest of the year to try to even come close to you. So thank you for what you've done today. And more importantly, thank you for your lifetime of service and selflessness. So as a reminder, despite our national designation, we are an unfunded nonprofit. We don't receive any funding from the federal government, state government. So if you like programs like this, like Rally Point, Veteran Voices, Beyond the Exhibit, please consider donating or becoming a member of the National Veterans Memorial Museum. Our next program comes up on February 16th. That's a members-only event for Beyond the Exhibit. And this is special since it features two men pictured in our combat thematic alcove. It's even more special to me because I know both of the men and have served with them in combat in Afghanistan with the 173rd Airborne Brigade. And then at the end of the month, on the 28th, we'll have a special commemoration for the 30th anniversary of the conclusion of combat for Operation Desert Storm. And we will have a great conversation with General Retired Colin L. Powell, our honorary chairman of the board. Everybody, thanks again for joining us. Dr. Brown, thank you again. Marcia, thanks for the help in keeping us straight. Everybody have a great weekend. And now we'll cut to our final video.
Thanks, Bo.